it was told to me by one of my colleagues who is a senior support worker at the home. She told me about how her manager had gone on a person-centred thinking skills training course, and she'd gone back to the care home so enthusiastic about it that it really inspired Sue to want to learn more. So a month or two later, Sue attended a person-centred thinking skills course herself, and she really wanted to think hard about how she could work with somebody within their restricted service and really make a difference, to share with others so that people could see that this could make a difference. So greatly enthused and inspired, she began to think about Tom. And Tom is a man who Sue had previously worked on nights in the home, and during the 4 years that she was a night worker, Tom didn't sleep well, so they'd spent many a night chatting, and Sue began to think, after looking at the various tools that she'd heard about, how good it'd be to capture all that rich information that was in her head that Tom had shared with her over the years that they'd spent together, you know, during the night shift. So Sue and Tom talked about this, and Tom was really keen to give it a try. And the first thing that they did was developed a timeline and you know, thinking about Tom's history. And what really came out of that was that something that Tom had really enjoyed was Crown Green bowling. Tom had had a fall 4 or 5 years earlier and broke his hip, and when he'd been discharged from the hospital, sadly he'd gone straight into the residential care home and lost contact with all his former friends, really, because he'd spent a number of months in hospital. So Sue and Tom began to think about what they could do to really make life better for Tom. And what Tom was saying was that he felt really quite lonely in the care home. It was very rare that he managed to get out, maybe 2 or 3 times a year at the most. So Sue suggested that they develop a relationship circle. So they used the relationship circle, and they identified the key relationships from the Crown Green Bowls Club, which wasn't actually that far away from the home. And Sue suggested to Tom that perhaps, you know, would he like her to help him begin to write to some of his old friends, because he was quite lacking in confidence. He didn't want to just go to the club. So Sue and Tom wrote some letters together and sent them off to some of his old friends. And as they gradually, each of them replied to Tom, that really, I think, gave him, from what Sue said, that confidence to think that he really wanted to get back into, to go into the club and his meeting up with his friends again. Sue was, you know, really quite clear that with the resources they had within the home, that wasn't something that they were going to be able to achieve. They wouldn't be able to release staff to go and spend 2 or 3 hours at the Crown Green Bowling Club with Tom. So they decided to use the matching tool, and they sent that off to the local volunteer bureau, and with the help of a really great worker at the volunteer bureau, he linked Tom up with a guy from the POPs project called Ian. So Ian and Tom gradually spent a month or 2 getting to know each other. Ian had, you know, Tom and Ian would go out for a coffee at the local cafe, and then they decided that they were going to start going back to the Crown Green Bowling, and that was a huge success. I think that once Tom had got over that initial feeling a bit wary of going back and meeting up with his friends from so long ago, it was fantastic. I mean, Tom couldn't bowl because of his hip, but Ian enjoyed the bowling, Tom enjoyed the company, and they were going 3 or 4 times a week. Massive, massive difference, obviously, to Tom's daily routines. And, you know, he talked about having a spring in his step and something, it was worth getting up in the morning to go and see the lads. But then we wanted to begin to think about, given that Tom couldn't actually bowl, how could we support him to have more of a purpose to going down to the Crown Green bowling? So we used the presence to contribution tool, and what we'd learnt from Tom, you know, during the previous conversations, was that he'd been a journalist with the Manchester Evening News for a number of years before he'd retired. And Tom actually suggested that he could write the newsletter for the bowling club, and he'd been going for a number of months by then and was having great conversations and really enjoying the company of the other guys and the ladies that were attending as well. And they'd got a real good network going. So consequently, Tom is now also producing the newsletter for the Crown Green bowling, as well as just having a great time going and meeting other people. And I think the way that he put it was, it's kind of so wonderful. I don't feel like a prisoner within four walls anymore. I'm getting out and I'm living a life, and that was fantastic. I think Sue did an amazing piece of work with Tom and showed how within a service where we know there are very limited resources and staff hours are very much, you know, accounted for, they could come up with a story like that was just incredible, really.